Welcome to the 12th annual, but first virtual, fundraising gala for the Global Fund for Widows. I'm Heather Ibrahim Leathers, president of the Global Fund for Widows, and on behalf of our team and board of directors, I'd love to express our gratitude to tonight's distinguished guests of honor, our incredibly generous corporate sponsors, and to our dedicated patrons whose donation and support cannot be overstated during these extraordinary times. We understand the sacrifices made by all of you throughout the COVID pandemic, and we are grateful for your continued support. When we launched our organization 11 years ago, we never imagined our mission would emerge as a global human rights movement, nor did we ever imagine that we would be elevated to frontline responders in the face of a global pandemic. But 2020 has proven to be a year like no other. The pandemic has not given widows any respite from the unspeakable suffering that they endure. They continue to be prevented from inheriting what's rightfully theirs: marital property, personal property, even their own children. Considered property themselves, they are forcibly inherited to their husband's next of kin. Considered a burden and a curse, they're evicted from their marital home, left without food, shelter, or access to basic needs. And they continue to be subjected to harmful traditional practices, including violent burial rites and unspeakable sexual violence, all with the intention of cleansing the widows of the sin of her husband's death. These violations have silenced widows, preventing their stories from reaching our global consciousness. Until one intrepid journalist, CNN Africa producer and Harvard Nieman Fellow Bukola Adebayo shattered barriers this summer with her courageous and heartbreaking report of the violent practices endured by widows in her native Nigeria. Ms. Adebayo overcame threats, grief, and risk of retribution to share the story, becoming the first ever in American media to do so. So tonight, we wish to honor our first guest of honor, Ms. Adebayo, for having the determination and vision to expose this story, and we welcome her from Nigeria. Ms. Adebayo.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bukola Adebayo, a senior producer and reporter with the CNN Bureau in Lagos, Nigeria. I report on breaking news. I also produce distinctive content on many stories coming out of some African countries. The focus of my reporting in the last 3 years have been on women, gender inequality, and I'm currently at Harvard, where I'm researching and exploring how media narratives help amplify the voices of women and girls. I'm deeply honored by this invitation and recognition by the Global Fund for Widows Foundation. They have been doing exemplary work on ground in many countries across the world, especially in Nigeria, supporting widows and partnering with stakeholders at the grassroots to amplify their voices. In Nigeria, the fate of a woman is in dire straits after her husband's death. And this story that I'm talking about this evening uh, is a personal one, and it's something that I worked on for more than a year and 6 months. I spoke to dozens of widows, and what struck me was that they all had uh, similar stories of the spate of abuse they suffered in the hands of their husband's relatives, the community, after their partner's death. Horrific stories. Horrific stories. Many told me they had been stripped of theirs and their husband's inheritance. In most cases, most of them had been stripped of their dignity. Two of them told me how they were forced to sleep by their husband's grave to prove their innocence in his death. I captured the story of one of the women in this particular piece. She, I know they're not exaggerating because my mother also went through a similar fate when my dad died in 2018. She was forced to shave her head and was only spared the worst practices because my siblings and I intervened. And our experience brought into sharp focus for me the plight of women and widows in Nigeria and uh, how they have been neglected and how their voices were not being heard. I would like to salute the bravery of the women and widows that spoke to me in the course of this story, despite the backlash they are facing and the potential backlash that they are going to face as we continue to speak on these issues. Without their courage, without them sharing their deepest stories with me, this story wouldn't have been, and authorities wouldn't have been also re-energized to try and look into this matter, this very urgent matter affecting a significant population of the women population in Nigeria. I would like to thank them. I would like to thank my editors at CNN and as equals for being patient with me and for encouraging me to piece together this story. I hope that it has helped peel another layer of abuse and inequality that women face under the guise of tradition and culture. I hope this helps in the process to stop it. Thank you once again and make widows matter.
Thank you, Buki. In truth, the pandemic only exacerbated the plight of widows. Within 2 short weeks of global lockdowns, widows began to sound the alarm of hunger. Disinherited from their assets and forced into insecure work, and always responsible for young children, lockdowns condemned widows to starvation, and they became prey for human traffickers. To save the lives of our widows and their children, Global Fund for Widows pivoted from building our proprietary bank model to feeding widows. We launched the emergency COVID response project called Feed Today, Eat Tomorrow. In Kenya, we not only fed nearly 100,000 meals to widows and their children, but we established some 400 small chicken farms for widows so that they could generate incomes and have some food security. In Cameroon, we fed nearly 20,000 meals and launched 240 chicken farms. And in India, our very own Global Goodwill Ambassador for Widows, Academy Award nominated filmmaker, GQ Man of the Year, CNN Hero nominee, and Michelin star-rated chef Vikas Khanna mobilized an awe-inspiring Feed India program that has served 50 million meals to India's citizens. Vikas has borne the responsibility of his office as Global Goodwill Ambassador for Widows honorably, ensuring that 5 million widows received the food, nutritional supplements, and attention that they deserve. Please join me in thanking Chef Vikas Khanna for his unwavering support of widows.
Good evening, friends. I'm Chef Vikas Khanna, a huge patron of Global Funds for Widow. About this time last year, I was honored with this amazing title of the Global Ambassador and the first Global Ambassador for Global Funds for Widow. And I was very honored because I have been working with a lot of widows and some organizations who support them in India. At that time, I did not understand the weight of this honor or the crown. As the time passed, I understood the gravity of telling the story of these women and bringing to the world. Because we felt that the only way we can create change, the first step for that is creating awareness. And through my movie, The Last Color, I was able to tell the pain, the story, and of course, with the hope of change. But this year has been hard for all of us. This year has been the true year of test for many of us. It was just seeing so much of pain and hunger around the world that I started the initiative of Feed India. And as of today, we have served over more than 50 million meals in more than 100 cities in India. But one moment which was very precious to me was, I think it was in May, when we had just crossed 7 million meals, and I get this beautiful message from Heather at Global Funds for Widow. She said that congratulations on this achievement, but do not forget our widows. We also call them mothers. That is a moment we started figuring out that how do we need to get to these people, because as a part of the society, we understand that they were extremely vulnerable. We started reaching out to different ashrams, understanding their needs, what all they need, and we started working towards that. And I'm very proud to say that we have fed more than 5 million meals to widows and their children and families in the past few months. And we'll continue to do that. As this pandemic has changed a lot of us, we also understand that the world will not be the same. At this time, it's a true test of our abilities, integrities, and most important, how do we use our privilege? And I'm really proud that Global Funds of Widow has put us all together on this one page to use all our privileges, all our opportunities to make lives better for widows around the world. Thank you for inspiring me forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Vikas. We are honored to partner with you. Despite the pandemic and assuming the role of a frontline responder, the Global Fund for Widows continued in our endeavor to economically empower widows, staying true to our tenet of the Golden Rule. She who has the gold makes the rules. And we did this by building our banks. We named our banking innovation the WSALA, the Widows Savings and Loan Association, and quietly, we've been disrupting the microfinance industry. So much so, in fact, that we are this year's proud recipients of the Business Council for Peace Women Forward Financial Catalyst Award. The WSALA model has been a roaring success. In Tanzania, our partner, the International Collaborative for Science, Education, and the Environment, has economically empowered 275 widows with 11 WSALA microbanks. 3 of our widows became so empowered that they were inspired to seek election into their local district council, with one of them, Mary Kuya, becoming successful in that bid and the first ever widow to sit in local government. In Malawi, 3 pilot SAMI banks are generating strong profits for 75 widows. And in India, 6 Sana banks will launch next week in celebration of Diwali. Overall, we have grown our network to 45 banks around the world, empowering 17,000 widows, and we are working quickly to address the 15,000 that have placed themselves on our Wasala waitlist. None of this success would have been possible without your generous support. This evening, if you're inspired, we invite you to make a contribution to the Global Fund for Widows. You can do this in a number of ways, either by texting your donation to WIDOWS to 76278 or clicking on the call for contributions on your screen. Our goal is to raise $100,000 to empower an additional 1,000 widows around the world. On the advocacy front, the drumbeat for change continues to beat louder. In the first quarter of the year, we briefed dozens of lawmakers on Capitol Hill, receiving strong support from both sides of the aisle, and even scheduling the first ever congressional hearing on widowhood. We presented to the White House, the State Department, the Human Rights Council, to the President of the General Assembly, and we presented to the UN Security Council more than 10 times, generating the highest level of awareness that the widowhood movement has ever known. But we needed a patron in the form of a nation who would be willing to bear the torch for widows on the floor of the United Nations. And in 2020, that patron finally arrived. Her name is Ambassador Victoria Soleimani, Deputy Permanent Representative of the Mission of Sierra Leone to the United Nations. Ambassador Soleimani had heard us speak at the United Nations and was inspired by our commitment to widows. Her Excellency quietly drew in her country's leadership, starting first with her leadership here at the mission, and then taking it to her ministers and even the First Lady, all of whom have pledged their country's full support. Tonight, please join me in welcoming Guest of Honor, Ambassador Victoria Soleimani.
Standing on existing protocols, I say good evening to everyone. It is almost 27 years since my country, Sierra Leone, a small West African nation, was ravaged by a brutal and senseless civil war, leaving untold destruction and uncounted number of widows in its wake. Further exacerbating the plight of widows are the human rights violations that they endure, practices of disinheritance, discrimination and violent, harmful traditional barriers and cleansing rights that trap them and their children in poverty. I too have borne witness to these human rights crimes. It was 42 years ago, while enjoying an evening at home, my father died suddenly of heart attack. The next day, before sunset, my mom, then aged 36, came close to being disinherited, had it not been for the timely intervention of her elder brother, who by then was a senior government official. Our uncles arrived immediately, taking all the money we had in the house, any item of value. In truth, they even took the clothes off my father's body. They demanded access to our father's bank account and deeds to our home. My grieving mother was traumatized by their conduct. I learned about the Global Fund for Widows in 2019 after they had presented at the United Nations. The understanding that this was a global human rights crisis and not just something that happened to my family was what I would call my moment of obligation. And I have inspired the support of my government, my country, into this obligation. My country is committed to bearing the torch and to lead in lasting change for widows. We may be a small country struggling to recover from the relics of a civil war, an epidemic, and now COVID-19. But we are rich in compassion, resolve, and the political will to leave a legacy of achieving gender equality, peace, and security. We will not rest until we have changed international laws protecting widows and ensuring no widow is left behind. I humbly accept this award, and I look forward to working with the Global Funds for Widows to make widows matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. it is also critical to realize and recognize the powerful men behind the movement. His Excellency Ambassador Dr. Ali Kaba is the permanent representative of the mission to Sierra Leone to the United Nations, and he is the former Minister of Foreign Affairs. Ambassador Kaba has long been a defender of human rights, especially the rights of women in peace and security. He has borne witness of the burden that his country's long civil war has had, leaving untold numbers of widows in its tragic wake. Upon learning that not a single resolution existed at the United Nations protecting widows, Ambassador Kaba took the torch himself, putting the full force of his mission and his country into changing international law that protects widows forever. This evening, it gives us great pleasure to crown Ambassador Kaba as the world's first and only Global Goodwill Ambassador for Widows in Peace and Security. The ambassador is committed to protecting widows in conflict and post-conflict contexts. Your Excellency, we thank you and welcome you as our Global Goodwill Ambassador for Widows in Peace and Security.
Excellencies, dear friends, I am honored to be with you today. I have the privileged position of representing my beloved country, Sierra Leone, as ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations. My country, while in the midst of a delicate recovery from a devastating conflict that ravaged our nation for years, was also given a second blow by an Ebola epidemic, now followed by the dreadful impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And this has resulted in dire consequences, including loss of lives of my countrymen and women. As a result of our long civil war, a good percentage of the women in my country are widowed. I have seen the tragedy and iniquity borne by widowhood, and I'm witness to its catastrophic intersectionalities such as child soldier recruitment, extremist indoctrination, child marriage, and the reprehensible phenomenon of the child widow. Yet their plight remains invisible, with not a single resolution protecting widows in the UN General Assembly, the UN Human Rights Council, or the UN Security Council. We must not remain silent. We cannot remain silent. This evening, I wish to pledge my support for widows around the world. In my capacity as Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Sierra Leone to the United Nations and Chair of the G7+, I accept to carry the torch for widows, especially those surviving conflict and the devastation caused by natural disasters. I pledge to bring seminal resolution to the floor of the United Nations that will forever change international law to protect, promote, and advance widows' fundamental human rights. I graciously accept this honor to become a Global Goodwill Ambassador for Widows in Peace and Security. I thank you for listening.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We look forward to changing the world with you. Perhaps the biggest challenge when launching a global human rights movement is to convince country governments to stand with you. This evening, we receive one of the greatest honors that a nonprofit can ever receive, the endorsement of a government. In Kenya, we've been quietly working with our implementing partner, Come Together Widows and Orphans organization, and our 2018 honoree, Diana Kamande, to establish 44 of our proprietary banks. They answer to the cries of hunger and to save untold numbers of daughters from certain childhood marriage and sons from extremist and criminal recruitment. Our impact now runs into the hundreds of thousands, and Kenya's government has taken notice. Kenya's Minister of Public Service and Gender, the Honorable Professor Margaret Kobia, took notice. In 2018, Minister Kobia joined us in co-sponsoring the first panel discussion on widowhood at the United Nations. Then, she proceeded to introduce seminal legislation in Kenya, changing 6 laws to protect widows, including criminalizing acts of disinheritance and violent traditional practices. The Honorable Minister established bursary funds to help widows keep their children in school and joined Global Fund for Widows in feeding them during Kenya's prolonged lockdowns. In August, Minister Kobia gave us the ultimate endorsement, instructing her government to match our funds dollar for dollar to establish 30 more banks in Kenya to save widows in rural districts. This evening, it is a great privilege to welcome our chief guest of honor, the Honorable Professor Margaret Kobia. Your Honorable Minister.
I want to thank the Global Fund for Widows for giving us this opportunity in Kenya to support women who are widowed. In Kenya, we have about 1 million women who have been widowed, and the majority of them experience various challenges. Challenges that involve discrimination because they are widows. We also have where their human rights are violated, especially harmful practices like inheritance. The fact that you have lost a husband and the relatives come and they claim that you need to be inherited, their property are taken away, and also they suffer some prejudice, and that makes it very difficult for them to enjoy a quality life within the society. So I take this opportunity to thank the Global Fund for empowering women through some economic empowerment through this funding that will make them be able to improve their quality of life, take care of their families, and generally contribute to socio-economic development of the country. I also want to thank the Kenyan organization on Widows and Orphans organization, which has worked very closely with the Ministry of Gender just to ensure that women widows are not passive. All they need is some empowerment, some support, so that they can be able to earn a livelihood and be able to support themselves. So some of the programs that we have worked very closely with the widows in Kenya is to support them through Women Enterprise Fund, which the Kenyan government uses for women, youth, and vulnerable communities. So widows in Kenya are kind of considered as vulnerable because we have seen in our context they continue to suffer some injustices. Therefore, getting an opportunity to have the Women Enterprise Fund for them to be able to do small businesses has been very, very helpful. Another area we have been working with the widows organization in Kenya is to try to influence policy and the legal framework so that they receive justice, fairness, and when their property is taken away, then they get justice. We have also been working with the widows organization to sensitize the society, the communities, that widows need to be protected, so especially when their property is taken away, putting them in a deep situation of poverty. And when they experience poverty, then we realize they will not be able to take care of their families, and then we get into the vicious cycle. Therefore, I've been championing, supporting widows through the organization, and I think that support has been really useful and appreciated by Kenya government, the communities, and particularly the organization of widows. Every year we celebrate a day in May where we have an annual celebration of widows where they come together to find what are some of the gains that they have made in the legal front, and what are some of the other gains they have made in socioeconomic empowerment, and also what are other gains they have made in the legal framework, and then also figure out what still needs to be improved. And I think that has been very useful because you can see most of the widows, they are able to move forward and they are encouraged. And also within the organization, they use it as a social support, which makes them share their experiences, their knowledge, and they're able to confront the challenges that they face better. So I today also want to recognize the award that the Global Fund has awarded me for my participation in supporting the window organization in Kenya. This award is not just for me, they are for all the teams we work with in Kenya, those in civil society, those in government who have helped us achieve milestone in supporting the windows. Therefore, I want to dedicate this an award not to just the people working in government, but also to widows themselves, because without working with the widows in Kenya to articulate and solve their problem, would not have gotten this award. Therefore, I just want to reiterate the government commitment to supporting the widows. This is a journey in process, work in progress, and I think the leadership of the Global Fund for Widows, I think, continue supporting the widows in Kenya and, of course, in the other parts of the world, so that widows also enjoy a better quality of life, and not only for themselves, to be for better well-being of both all people within the country, within the context. Therefore, I just want to commit that we will continue supporting the widows through their organization, and they should feel very encouraged that today we are raising funds to continue their socioeconomic empowerment. Through the experience of working with vulnerable communities, vulnerable women, we have come to realize that the most empowering innovation is to give them economic empowerment. When they're economically empowered through a fund, they are able to have a voice, they are able to gain the confidence, and they are able to have their dignity to be able to put their requirement, their needs, before any forum where they are able to get support. So I think this effort needs to continue, and whatever is required, my Ministry of State Department of Gender is more than willing to support the ongoing initiative through the Global Fund for Widows. Thank you.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. Our last guest this evening is Ms. Faustine Wekesa. Faustine lived a peaceful middle-class life in Kenya until the day she was widowed. A woman of dignity, Faustine chose poverty over humiliation and found herself living in one of Africa's largest urban slums, caring for her 4 children. Then, Faustine heard about the Global Fund for Widows Banks, called Brook Banks in Kenya, through our partner Diana Kamande. With nothing to lose, Diana took a chance on us. She organized a group of 25 widows, called themselves the Vision Sisters, and started the first Brook Bank in Kenya. In truth, we expected Faustine to earn a 220% return on her initial investment when starting the bank. However, after only 1 year, Faustine and the Vision Sisters actually returned 550% on their initial investment, growing their bank to $5,000. Please join me in welcoming our final guest of honor this evening, Faustine Wekesa.
My name is Faustine Wekesa. I'm the founder of Vision Sister Self-Help Group, and I'm the first chairperson for Brook Bank in Kenya. I'm a mother of 4. I became a widow in 2007 when my husband died during 2007 post-election violence in Kenya. Some people volunteered to take me to this place where my husband's body was lying. So when we arrived, we found the body was separate from the head, and the head was put in a plastic bag, and the plastic bag had been hung on a tree. And I called the one that I was helping during the election period to assist me with some money so that I could get only transport to go and bury my husband. When I arrived there, my brother-in-law was very happy, my mother-in-law was very happy, and they told me, "We are happy that you came because according to our tradition, you have to prove that you did not kill him by sleeping with the corpse." When I refused, I was sent away and I was told, "Disappear from our presence." When we arrived in Nairobi, it was very late. Together with my children, we decided to get into this dry drainage system and we just fell asleep. Around 6 a.m. in the morning, my children were very hungry and they were crying. There was a watchman who was guarding one of the buildings and he had a loaf of bread. When he heard the children crying, he came and gave them the bread that he had. At least there was something for them to put into their stomach. They stopped crying. Again, we found our landlord had already gotten another tenant. I decided, together with my children, to look for a friend who at least hosted us. I stayed there and this lady continued to give us a place for 2 months. At least I got something to do and I got money now to start off my life and to pay my house. People decided to isolate themselves from me, and most of the people knew my status because I am HIV positive and nobody wanted to interact with me. I had lost my property, I had lost a husband, and now I lost my dignity as a woman. Nobody wanted to interact with me. Every time I used to go to clean people's clothes. If I needed an extra income, I used to clean the clothes, wash the dishes. At the same time, I have to go fetch water for them. And this was the best day in our life with my children because I could go home with $3 every day. And I continued talking to fellow women when we were still doing this washing, and we decided to start a group with my fellow women. Later on, I got to know about Come Together Widows and Orphans organization, which in turn introduced Brook Bank to us. So we decided now we were going to do our table banking in a better and a bigger way. Somebody would need $50 and luck. Now they would start getting at least $100 and above because of Brook Bank. I know even when they realize I have an award from Global Fund for Widows, I know they will come running. When we were starting Brook Bank, we were only 25 members. And it is so amazing that today we are at 61 and we already have 5 members in waiting. Our group started with $2,500 and amazingly today we are at $5,000. So we surpassed the expectation of Brook Bank and we are looking forward. By December again we will have a booming interest as a group. Because I have been acknowledged by Brook Bank and Global Fund for Widows, I have received this award. I've received this award with an open heart and I'm so happy. And from today henceforth now, I think you have graduated me to stop meeting widows in the place that we meet and sometimes from my house. I think now I need an office so that I can display this award. Together we can make widows matter.
Faustine, thank you for your courage and your honesty. Faustine's success could not have been possible without the generous donations from you, our friends and sponsors. And given Faustine's success, nearly 15,000 widows have placed themselves on our microbank waitlist. Our hope this evening is to raise $100,000 to empower them. On your screen this evening, you'll be able to make a donation to support, or you could text your donation to widows to 76278. That's widows to 76278. It only takes $100 to forever change the life of a widow and up to 5 of her children. And this year, despite the difficulties presented by COVID, Global Fund for Widows is committing 100% of the proceeds collected to be directly dedicated to the widows themselves. A donation of $10,000 will open 4 banks in Kenya and support 100 widows and up to 500 of her children. A donation of $5,000 will open 2 banks in Sierra Leone and change the lives of 50 widows and 250 of their children. A donation of $2,500 will allow 25 widows to start a grain mill or a laundromat in her urban slum. And a donation of $1,000 will enable 10 widows to start vegetable stands or chicken farms. We leave you this evening with one last inspiration. Shot during the heart of Kenya's severe lockdowns, and with the blessings of Cabinet Secretary Professor Kobia, and with the police escorting our intrepid partners the entire way, our widows insisted that they share their gratitude and success stories with you. There is a human rights crisis that no one is talking about. A crisis endured by 300 million widows. Widows of all ages, even child widows. Widows endure 3 main forms of human rights violations. Widows are disinherited, evicted from their marital home, and denied their rightful inheritance, even land or property that they bought or brought into the marriage. They can even be inherited themselves as property and forcibly married to their brother or father-in-law.
Wakaona mmoja inherit. Nilizidi kukataa, lakini siku moja ule alikuwa ako in charge ya kuishi na mimi, niliona amebeba mabati mpya. Na kawaida huko kwetu unaporudishwa na shemeji yako kwa hiyo nyumba yako mzee, huwa wanang'oa bati moja na wanaweka lile lipya, kumaanisha umepata mume mwingine. Lakini nilikataa na nikatoroka. Nilipotoroka ilibidi nitoroke na watoto wangu, kwa maana singewaacha mahali pale.
Ndiarekiro thie nginyona ndemuthike, aciari ni makirehe thina no ni ndacokire ni ndaregirwo na ngicoka na gwitũ itarĩ ona ũrĩa no mwana tu ndathire nake. Gũtirĩ kĩndũ ona kĩndahotire gwĩka atĩ kuma nakĩo.
They are discriminated against. Community members, community leaders, clergy, even the courts prevent widows from accessing justice, economic opportunity, or dignified work.
Sasa hao watoto tupu wakatoka, wengine wakakuja kuchanga kwa shambangu. Sasa vile walichanga mahali mimi nilikuanga na nyumba nikiwa na bwana, nyumba yangu hiyo nyumba ikachomeka, wakachoma, sijui walichoma, sijui walifanya nini, hiyo nyumba ikachomeka.
And widows endure harmful traditional practices, violent and degrading burial rites intended to cleanse the widow of the sin of her husband's death.
Nilikatazwa kushika bwana kwa sababu niliambiwa nilale na maiti na nikakataa. Sasa kutokea hapo ndio wakanifukuza. Na watoto wangu walikuwa wadogo, singewaacha mtoto hata mmoja. Nilifanya juu na chini, nikakuja na watoto wangu wote hapa Nairobi.
Mama akaniambia, sasa sitaki urudi Nairobi, nataka huyu ataishi kwa hii nyumba, hata bado kwa mdogo, hata unaweza saa. Mimi nililia, nikaona ni kama amenidharau.
We empower widows by building banks, banks that are made for widows and owned by widows. In Kenya, our banks are called Brook Banks. To start a bank, we ask widows to join our groups and invest a small amount of money. And for every dollar that the widow invests, Global Fund for Widows gives her 2.
Asante sana. Sasa Global Fund ilikuja ikakuwa timu mzuri sana kwa kuchenga sisi wa mama wale hawana mapapa. Tunachanga hizo pesa, tunaweka huko, tunakopeshana, tunarutisha, mwingine anakopa hivyo, na tumejengana hivyo.
Brookbank is giving widows an unprecedented chance at life. Widows are launching businesses, saving, building wealth, and helping other widows.
Koguo ndiagaga cia gũcokia kĩama-inĩ na ngahota cia ngona cia kũrĩ oho na ngakomba rĩngĩ no nginya ũcokie nĩgetha one ga gũcokia tũcokagia na 10% nĩgetha tũkũrie kĩama tũgakĩũgũithie kĩama.
Nachukua kama 20,000 nikaenda nikanunua nyanya mingi, nikanunua sukuma na wengine ya kienyeji, hata nafurahia ukweli, hata nakula mzuri kwa nyumba, hata watoto wangu wanang'ara, hata mimi mwenyewe nang'ara, hata nikipita nasikia tu niko salama.
Sasa mimi naona nimefaidika, hata nguo so naona niko smart. Nimevaa smart, hata mtu anaona mimi ni pipi ya mtu, ama mimi ni mtu nasaidiwa, ama nafanya kakasi kangu kama ana sina. Ni hii tu sabuni, lakini nalipa huko na kopa.
Tangu nipatane na Brookbank, naona maisha imebadilika kwa sababu napata mkate wa kila siku. Hata watoto wanasoma. Na hata naweza nikasmile at least.
Join us, Global Fund for Widows, and the 300 million voiceless widows that we represent. I hope that you've been inspired to continue to support. You can support by donating here today or texting widows to 76278 or by clicking the donate button on our website, globalfundforwidows.org. Thank you again for helping us achieve these goals. We hope that you stay safe and healthy, and we are grateful to know that together we can make widows matter. Good evening.